We have to, as evangelicals, if you voted for Biden in this last election, really deal now with the aftermath of your virtuous stance against Donald Trump and ask yourself, well, were you really doing the right thing? And what do we do now as a result of everything that's going on in the culture war? Because the reality is under Joe Biden, the culture war is taking turns that probably most of us didn't even see coming, and that now as evangelicals we have to reckon with that culture war. And I think it's very, very important that we as Christians understand this, that we cannot idly sit by and pretend that culture doesn't exist. We cannot take platitudes like just read the Bible and pray and let your conscience be heard at the ballot box. No, we have to realize that culture has an impact, and that culture is not passive, and that we have a role as Christians to impact the culture and not just cloister ourselves away in the church, but to actually make a difference in the culture. Here's a couple of reasons why. One of the reasons that it's so important for us to impact culture is that Jesus himself used culture. In fact, he came, the Bible says, at a specific point in time. In history, in the fullness of time, Jesus came. So that means at a specific political time, at a specific geographical location, Jesus is coming and using all of that as a background, as a leveraging point for his ministry. And then, of course, we know the greatest symbol for freedom in the whole world is the cross. And what is the cross except a cultural institution, a cultural machination, a cultural symbol for execution? And so God was not afraid to use the cross, and God was not afraid to use a geopolitical time in order to issue forth his agenda here on this earth. And so it's a biblical thing for us as Christians to understand culture matters. I think it's important for us to understand this, that the future that we're responsible for creating, either by acting or not acting, will be the future that our children live in. That it's our responsibility. And when you become a parent, you understand this responsibility more than ever before. It's our responsibility to create the kind of world that we want our kids to live in. And this is why we need to engage as Christians in the culture war, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of future generations. Now, I believe this is illustrated really, really well in a cartoon that was just recently played on Cartoon Network to talk about anti-racism. So check this clip out.
Colorblindness is our game because everyone's the same. Everybody join our circle. Doesn't matter if you're
white or black
or purple.
What the? Whoa. Hold up a minute here. Ugh, who wrote this? I think it kind of does matter that I'm purple. I mean, I'm purple because I'm literally an alien.
Well, I'm not an alien, but it definitely matters to me that I'm black.
Yeah, it makes a difference that I'm white. I know the two of us get treated very differently.
I just think it's messed up to compare me being an alien to you two being different races. You're both human. You're totally biologically the same. Adding purple people into a lesson about human racism makes no sense.
Yeah, that is pretty weird. I think people like the black, white, or purple thing because adding a fantasy race in there helps distract from the actual racism black people have to deal with.
Right. My experience with anti-black racism is really specific. Other people of color experience other forms of racism too, but you won't see any of that if you don't see color.
Dude, so this entire public service announcement could be a ploy to avoid talking about racism altogether. Hey, could we get a rewrite where we appreciate each other without erasing what makes each of us different?
Okay, but it's gonna add a couple hours to the shoot.
I can
My
make it work.
speaker's open.
You were rolling just now, weren't you? Can't we just slap some graphics on this and call it a day?
The first problem I have with that video from a cultural perspective as I see it is that in essence, it's endorsing prejudice. It's endorsing you to look at somebody and place a value on them or place a truth claim on them simply based upon the color of their skin. This is the essence of prejudice, right? To prejudge someone. To prejudge somebody based upon the color of their skin is prejudice. And that is exactly what that clip just showed. Is that if you're white, you can automatically be assumed, regardless of any evidence to the contrary, and believe me, there is evidence for some people, that just simply based upon the color of your skin, you have privilege. All right, and then you have another prejudice, just simply based upon the color of your skin. If you are black, you are going to live a harder and more oppressive life just simply because you're black. Now, again, there's zero evidence that needs to be taken into account to justify these claims. We just assume that they're true. Why? Because there's a cultural agenda called anti-racism that's being proposed, not just to adults, but also to your children. And we need to resist this if at all possible.
I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream.
To tell a child just because of the color of their skin they will have a harder life and have less of a chance of getting ahead is akin to child abuse. We cannot afford to communicate these vile messages to our children that let them know, just simply based upon what's the melanin count in your skin, you're going to have a hard life or an easy life. That's nonsense. That's not the America we live in anymore, and we need to speak up against it. Now, all I can say to you is this, is at a time where they're canceling Dr. Seuss books, and then the National Education Association is endorsing other books like Jacob's New Dress. You can imagine just from the title what that's about. And I Am Jazz, a book that teaches kids that they can magically change into another sex whenever they want. When the National Education Association is endorsing those books, but we can't even read Dr. Seuss anymore, we have a real problem that we have to pay attention to as a culture. Christians, think about the kind of world that you want your kids to live in. Think about that world and what it would take for you to help create that world, and then dedicate yourself to whatever is necessary to inform yourself with podcasts like this one or with other information sources to make sure that you are staying as informed as possible as to what's going on in the culture, so that we are not sticking our heads in the sand anymore. Because we can't afford to do it for ourselves and for the next generation.
Catch new episodes of Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman for free right now by going to YouTube or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Simply type Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman in the search bar and click on my face. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to stay informed when a new episode drops.